Hello and welcome to Movers and Shakers. I'm Ken Miller. I'm joined by 5th District State Senator Jeff Pittman today. Jeff, thank you very much for stopping by.
So glad to be here.
Kind of middle of session now. You know,
Yep.
I think it's turnaround time. Is that what you guys call it?
If you think about a football game, we're on the 50-yard line right now, making our way to the...
So we're getting ready. We're recording this at the end of February, so we're almost into March. And almost into March, and not surprisingly, taxes are a huge issue, as you are well aware. The governor has already successfully vetoed a GO-backed plan. I think that was the flat tax.
GOP-backed plan. Yeah.
Right, yeah, a flat tax plan. Mm-hmm. So as of right now, and again, late February, how many plans are still being bandied about Topeka? And maybe more importantly than that, do you see anything gaining traction that at the end of this session, you and any other lawmaker is going to be able to say, here, Kansas, here's some tax relief?
Absolutely. So, as you know, Ken, we're sitting on a surplus. This is the first time in my career here in the legislature, 4 years as a state rep and, 3.5 years now as a state senator.
Right.
And we're in quite a position. I got to talk about why we're here before we get into the tax piece. One of the reasons we're here is the federal government let us, during the pandemic, not pay $1 billion for 3 years for what's called an FMAP fee. It has to do with care and some of that things.
Okay.
So you think 1, 2, 3, that's about $3 billion that we did not have to pay, but we are going to get back into the routine of paying that. So we use some of that money for a one-time spend, but it dropped in a lot of money. Mm-hmm. As we look at any kind of plan regarding tax reduction, we have to also look at what is our projection to fund education, to make sure our roads are funded with the state highway plan. We don't want to retreat back to what I would call the Brownback days of the 2010s and get into that same dire situation. So the current plan, what's called the flat tax plan, it's got some good stuff in it. It really has some stuff that I like. I don't like that we've held food sales tax hostage. We could have accelerated that 2 years ago. And so many people, I just went to the grocery store this morning, and the prices have risen so drastically in the last couple of years. We should have put that in place just to get some relief on the food sales tax. But beyond that, the flat tax, there's a lot of good things that go along with it. The thing I don't like about it is it raises the rate up on the lowest income, 3.1, it goes up to 5.25. Middle goes from 5.15 up to 5.25, and then the highest tax bracket goes from 5.75 down to 5.25. So you see a big drop on the highest income earners. In fact, 70% of savings, I've been told, is 40%, or the top 20% get 70% of the savings, is the kind of number I've been heard. And if you're making 40 grand and you're only getting 75 cents back, same thing at 90 grand, that puts the burden on our working families, our median income earners. And there are some exemptions in place that do give the lowest income earners quite a good break. But what is it? If you're making $5 million, which I'm not, you get $22,000 in tax relief. If you're making 42 grand as a family, you get 75 cents. And so it just didn't make sense. It gives so many breaks. But what we can do, there is an appetite to do something. And in my community, we went door to door. It was property tax, because we've had the evaluations going up and the assessments going up by double digits. I know mine has. So what I'm interested in is how do we get property tax relief and then get some income relief and get that food sales tax down to zero. And there is a plan out there that does that. It's sponsored by Democrats and Republicans. It was a counter offer. But this flat tax was pushed and rammed by leadership. So there wasn't a lot of room for compromise. The good thing about the veto is now we're in a space to compromise. We really are. And I can't see leadership wanting to get out of session without having done something on taxes.
And I guess that's my follow-up question. Percentage-wise, what are the chances that nothing changes when you get done with session? Is there a chance that and to
if
me,
I'm a betting man, that's a 1 in 20. That's 5%.
So 5% chance that nothing happens. So something's going to get done.
And I'll tell you why. Because let's say that some leadership just says, they're going to throw their hands up and says, "Oh, this is impossible to work with you guys," which I cannot see happening. But it could. People do get emotional.
And it's an election year.
And and they'll just throw their fingers out. And I don't think that's a good election strategy, personally. I think there's a lot of folks that know that we can do it, want to do it, and the ranks underneath the leadership on the conservative side would not stand that. So I think there is an appetite amongst the rank and file to say, hey, we need something.
Right.
And the governor has come out and said, I will bring you back in a special session
Right.
if you don't pass any kind of tax relief. And the tax relief we're looking at is, eliminating the Social Security tax, reducing that grocery store sales tax or the food sales tax. What are some of the other pieces of that? Getting that back to school state tax holiday reduction, increasing the standard deduction, increasing the amount that's exempted from property tax. We get some property tax on the state level. Personally, I would like us to do a couple more things. I've got a constitutional amendment that I put together that would limit, how much our valuations go up per year, give us some tax certainty on our property tax. That's passed the Senate. And then I also want to see us return what's called the LAVTR
Right.
back to the cities and counties. It's about 130 million that would come back to the cities and counties, and that puts a reduction into the property tax needs of our local entities. I don't know if that's going to go forward, but I know that we can come up with something. We just got to sit down at the table now that we've both kind of sent our salvos across. Now is the time to negotiate.
Sure.
And I think we can do something.
One thing I wanted to, and it's sort of kind of tax related, but not really. And I think I ask you about this about every time that you come in. And it's about capers. As somebody who's probably going to be taking capers in the next year and a half,
Sure.
2 years, I'm obviously very interested. I saw I think they were retired school teachers who had come to Topeka. This might have been mid-February.
Yep.
Who were saying we have not had a cost of living increase. Whatever you were getting back in 1990, you're still getting same amounts. Is there any talk about that in Topeka? We've got a surplus that I think you and I 3 or 4 years ago would have said, this is never going to happen.
Never gonna
now it's happened.
But through fiscally responsible policies and some of those federal things,
Right,
we are at a point where we can do some tax relief, and I support that.
Given that, is there any chance for capers, the potential capers users and those who are using capers now, that we might see a cost of living increase? I'm reading your face.
Short
and
answer,
it ain't going to happen.
I cannot see a path with our current makeup in the Senate in particular. There are some key folks that have voted against it and said no, never in my lifetime almost. Not even what I'd call, that's a COLA, cost of living allowance, not even a diet COLA, not even like a $500 13th check. There was one piece that did increase out of the Senate, and it might go through, and it's kind of morbid, but it's a death benefit increase.
For a spouse?
Let's say I pass. Right now, my spouse would get $4,000.
Okay, gotcha.
It would go up to $6,000 to cover the costs of
funeral
costs.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Is that a lot? No.
No.
Am I going to benefit from it?
No.
No. Is everybody going to get it one day?
Yeah.
I mean, it's something, but
Right.
we're going to have a hearing. One special group is our correction workers here locally. They're in a special type of capers called Corrections 2.
Okay.
There's level 1, level 2, and level 3 capers. They're in a level 2 group kind of on their own, and they get a multiple, kind of like KP&F does, of 1.85. And so when they retire, it determines how much they're going to get in there.
Sure.
I've got a bill out there that only costs $4 million in terms of unfunded liability for a lot of benefit to bring that up to 2.0 as the multiple. It's a slight increase. Testing the waters to see if there might be an appetite for even a small increase for our correction workers who benefit from that locally. But I'm telling you, man, there is not a lot of appetite to help with the retirement system here.
Yeah, not good.
And we have done so well in terms of funding that. Once we got to our policies that gave us some fiscal responsibility, we have paid off and paid into the capers and kept up with all our payments.
And that's the one thing I want people to understand, is that there has been progress on capers, because 10, 15 years ago there was a solvency question, Now that question seems to have at least...
Solvency question's gone, but like people you talk to, that doesn't necessarily help them with day-to-day checks. It just means that they'll keep coming.
Right.
There's no chance that they won't keep coming.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that they're going to increase. I support it. I think we should do this. I mean, it's been so long since we had a cost of living allowance. And maybe next year the makeup will be just slightly different, and we'll see if we can get this through. Okay.
All right. Expanding Medicaid has been talked up earlier this session. It seems to come up every session. Efforts have always failed. Is there anything different? And again, the surplus kind of makes it different, but what's different this year about the possibility that you might see Medicaid expansion in Kansas?
I'll first start off that the surplus doesn't really have any impact.
Okay, okay.
In fact, we get $62 million more in our general budget if we expand Medicaid.
Okay.
So in order for us not to expand Medicaid, we have to basically take $62 million and pay into what our budget is, because the governor's budgeted with it, and because of the federal government's incentives, we actually make money for incentives for the first couple of years. What's changed this year? Well, the governor has come up with a plan, and it has all the different things that have always been the objections. Work requirements. There's a poison pill. If the federal government were to go below 90 or 95%, I can't remember the number, we would stop the program. So federal government pays for this much, we pay 5 to 10%, depending on the year you're looking at. And we get $790 million approximately in benefits per year. So that's for 5%, you're getting all this money to go towards healthcare outcomes, mental health, helping the sheriffs out there with their jail population. Actually, that helps out. Helping out with the working poor, and that helps out our small businesses. There's incredible support amongst the small businesses because it gives health options for the workers that might be making minimum wage there. It also has a couple other requirements. There's often, I heard last night, some misinformation about this. There was actually a forum last night, and some of my counterparts were claiming that there are about 4 to 7 million, depending on the time of year, people on what's called an IDD waiver, and they're waiting for services from the state. They typically have some kind of disability or something. Medicaid expansion has no impact. It's a different program. You shouldn't confuse the two. We shouldn't obscure the situation here. Yes, we can do more to get that line shorter on those IDD waivers. You don't hear about it, disability waivers. But that has nothing to do with expanding Medicaid. Totally different programs, totally run differently, and one does not impact the other.
Okay.
But I think that there is a plan out there. The challenge is there's not the leadership will not let it run through the process, and the members will not go through the process of bucking the leadership with amendments and things like that. I'd say they just are not willing to buck their leadership at this point to actually make this happen.
Okay.
Which means that we're still sending that money out to, say, New York and California and all 40 states that have expanded Medicaid, and we're not reaping the benefits here of that. We've given up $7 billion, I think, in terms of what the numbers are.
Okay.
Could have gone towards our health outcomes here in Kansas.
Okay. All right, so bills have been filed related to abortion, including one that would levy fines against physicians who provide abortion services. And I put together these questions sometimes early in the session. So what's transpired, and is abortion still a relevant issue in the 2024 session?
Well, as you know, we had the August 22.
Yes.
Value them both constitutional amendment that went to the people. In my district, it was overwhelmingly, they did not want to stop, access to these healthcare reproductive rights for women. Didn't want the government coming in and telling them how they had to manage their bodies and their pregnancies. There are still, even last week, a series of anti-abortion bills that keep getting introduced, and it's hard to fathom. I suppose when, people have principles, but they're being blessed by leadership, meaning they want to work these and they want to put them in place. There are things like, I've got a couple of them here, SB 425 would allow pregnant women to claim child support starting at the day of conception. So you've heard about the IVF rule, maybe in Alabama.
Right.
There's a lot of push to have personhood be defined as that moment of conception, which puts in a lot of questions in terms of child support, lawsuits based on the fetus, against the mother if they're doing bad things. I don't even know. There's a lot of different weird questions like that. And then there's other ones that would fund certain centers. There's ones that, like you said, it would make it a crime for coercion to obtain an abortion, and then if a doctor performed that abortion, they could be guilty of criminal and civil procedures. So they're still there, and they have momentum. I believe they will get vetoed, and it just seems like we could be focused on things like good tax reform, things like helping our folks out with them, build the economy here and not focus on this issue that has already gone to the people.
Okay. All right, bringing it back home a little bit, more
Sure.
local issue. There are local efforts to push Leavenworth County transportation projects, as you're well aware. We had a regional meeting, and when I say we, I mean the cities, the counties in this area had a regional meeting in Lenexa. That was back in October. And improving K-5 was actually one of the top projects. And I know you're aware of this. What can you do as our senator to help further the cause of getting more state transportation dollars into Lansing and Leavenworth County, and specifically about K-5? Because I know that it's right there in a study. We got at least positive comments out of Calvin Reed, Secretary of Transportation. It's on the map, so to speak. What are you hearing? Is that something? And not that we would expect to see an expansion of that next year, but these things always take time, and they got to get into a pipeline. Where do you see K-5 at now specifically? Because obviously that would be improving a main artery into and out of Lansing.
It would be. You know, I'm impressed with KDOT even over the last 5 years. They have really reached out into the communities and gone out and got the public comment, got the prioritization, and I appreciate that. Absolutely. We've got studies now in terms of the county transportation plan. We've got strategic studies going on, in Lansing and Leavenworth about what we expect. So having those things in line helps tremendously when we start positioning projects. As you know, I'm going to talk about the Centennial Bridge. It was slated probably 5 years ago.
Right.
And it still hasn't happened. I mean, they don't anticipate breaking ground until 2026, 2027. And even that might be delayed because of MDOT over Missouri, right?
Right.
So there are a lot of dependencies, but by having the plan and getting on the list,
Right.
it increases the probability. And that's where we're at with K5 is we still need to, I don't know if there is an exact plan of which property lines would be impacted, if we would straighten out some of the curves, if we would just put put some shoulders out there.
Right.
Would we want to have some, wider access so that maybe there's some turning areas so that you wouldn't have to slow down as much? I think those are questions that would still need to be answered. But I'll tell you, my role on not appropriations, that's in the House, but on Ways and Means, which is the Budget Committee, gives this community a voice at the table when we're actually, sometimes we don't get to talk about the budget on the floor. And all the action happens inside of those budget committees.
Right.
And so I'm uniquely positioned to help out our Lansing, Baser, Western Wyandotte, and Leavenworth community with that voice on that committee to help say, hey, what's going on with this project, and can we bring more dollars in here and prioritize this over that? And so, I think that's a valuable thing.
To me, what was most interesting at that Lenexa meeting, and again, that was October 2023, so it's been a few months since that happened. It was the first time in those meetings that we all sat in, the breakout groups, where I actually heard Wyandotte County folks talking about it should be a priority to fix and improve K-5.
K-5
Never heard
and K-7.
And K-7.
We've got World Cup coming in 2026, which will impact our area. We've got American Royal being positioned just north of the Legends.
Right.
And there's a series of other kind of tourist attraction type things that are coming in just to the south of us. That's only going to mean more activity up here, more opportunities for businesses to come in that help cater to some of those groups.
Do you get a sense, your Senate district, for those that don't know, does cover where I live, Piper, but Western Wyandotte, as you've mentioned. Do you get a sense that there's more energy towards the Western Wyandotte County area, Wyandotte County in general, working with Leavenworth County on things as we look into the future and see World Cup soccer coming, American Royal coming? Is there a little bit more synergy there? There
is, but we as a community have to step up and go interact with that. I mean, Wyandotte County and the UG, Unified Government, is its own beast. I mean, they have things they're figuring out. They went through a huge transition about 10, 15 years ago in terms of their government structure. They have these rules in place, and there is some divide there about the inner city and the Piper area, and Legends has been incredibly successful. And it is a hot spot for business development. It just is, and it attracts a lot of folks. Leavenworth is positioned right there. I don't know. I mean, we participate in MARC, which is the Mid-America Regional Council, and they have plans about the area. I think the appetite is there, and there's more people noticing that we are part of that community. But we have to reach out and get some of that too.
Mm-hmm.
We have to interact and actually be assertive and say, hey, we are your north neighbor. How can we work a little bit more together? And it does happen sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in a different, they operate differently
Sure.
than we do. They're more like a big city, and
Yeah.
we're more like a county with little cities in it,
Right.
or moderate sized cities.
Sure.
So I think that we're a little bit more disconnected when we interact with them.
Right.
But it's an exciting time for this whole region.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, to wrap it up, maybe some issues that are flying under the radar. We've talked about a lot of major issues here, but given that we're about heading into March in this 2024 session, what issues are you seeing and maybe you're interacting on maybe a daily basis that we don't see in the Kansas City Star, the Topeka Capital Journal, or on
Sure.
TV news at night?
There's actually quite a few things like that. And I'm not going to say they're absolutely interesting either.
Sure.
I hate to preface it like this. I will say, I just want to make one mention in terms of there's still pressure on our election system. I mean, with the election coming up,
Right.
and the story out there, the narrative of the elections being stolen. There's a lot of pressure on certain folks in the legislature to kind of attack the election system. I think here in Leavenworth County, we've got a fantastic set of folks running our elections, and we've shown through audits it's great. But we're watching that, and there are bills and folks pushing in on, hey, we need to reduce the number of ability to vote. And I want to put a shout out to education, where we funded it for 5 years. The general fund has been fully funded. It's now not under the Supreme Court's jurisdiction, so it puts more flexibility in terms of what we do and a little longer time cycle in terms of having a review. And there's a lot of pressure on special education, and there's still a lot of pressure on privatizing vouchers and things like that. And that's, it was big last year. It's coming up again this year, so we're going to watch that. So those are challenges that, I'd suggest people keep an eye on, depending on their point of view on that.
Sure.
Things that are under the radar, workers' comp. Workers' comp has not been touched for 10, 15 years in a big way. There was a lot of nervousness. We were like number 49th in the United States for, total disability or partial disability benefits. It was like 155, and we've raised that up to 450,000 lifetime cap. There's a whole series of caps that we've raised with negotiations between the Kansas State Chamber, different business entities, labor unions, and Kansas trial lawyers. And some of the things that the businesses were asking for were a reduction in the number of medical opinions, a little bit more streamlined so there's not as many lawsuits, but then raising those caps up and some other things that help out the workers. And so that compromise was pulled together from a bunch of different entities, and because it was backed by folks on many different sides of the political spectrum, it's coming through, and I'm telling you, it is monumental.
So this is something you see the governor signing, and we're actually going to have.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's big news for workers. It's a big news for our businesses out there. So that's really under the radar, right? A couple other things. We're modifying the consumer credit code, uniform consumer credit code. Has to do with borrowing money, and once again, these are things that haven't been touched in years because a lot of the entities didn't want to see their interest rates capped or this, that, or the other thing. And we're going through a rework of that with different interested parties. So number of business things that are coming through on financial institutions and insurance, those are exciting things for that type of industry. Are my folks out here really that interested in it? But it's important work.
Yeah, sure.
And it's great to have those entities coming together to do that. In order to do that, we have to have different stakeholders that are willing to work.
And some of those items that you just mentioned, did that get on your plate because we had a surplus? Does this not happen if we were talking, scratching for every dollar?
It's an interesting thing. I think there was a break. I think that it's not a hot issue for my conservative friends, and we've pushed for workers' comp reform in terms of what I'd say I'd say me and some of the folks that I've been pushing for it for our workers, and it just the entities saw that we had a problem. I'm not gonna say it was initiated by me, but I absolutely support it. It was part of the process in terms of monitoring how the negotiations were going. Why now? It's not because of the surplus. It might be because of the workforce issues that we're having, the need to have good laws in place to make our workers safer and more satisfied here in the state, and business entities recognizing that was an issue here. I mean, yeah, that's a good thing. We're also modifying the unemployment insurance, the unemployment system. We've had some challenges over the last month actually in terms of unemployment. I'm glad we're modifying both some of the laws and process as well as modernizing the system, and I'm on that committee that helps with monitoring the system improvements that they've got going on. So pretty excited about some of those things. It's really about workforce development, economic development for me, and seeing how we can have that come and benefit our area here.
Okay. All right. I've been speaking with 5th District State Senator Jeff Pittman for Movers and Shakers. I'm Ken Miller.